In this chapter, we are going to be talking about verbal communication. We're going to start by looking at the relationship between language and meaning, then talking about the functions of language and using language well, before finally talking about the impacts of language on our society and culture, and vice versa. So first, let's talk about the relationship between language and meaning. You might think that the relationship between the words that you say and the meaning of those words is pretty straightforward. However, the relationship between language and meaning is not as straightforward as you might think. And this is largely because language is symbolic. So a symbol is something that stands in for or represents something else. And these symbols can be communicated in a number of different ways. Symbols can be communicated verbally, for example. So you might speak the word hello to someone if you are trying to greet them. Symbols can also be communicated in writing. For example, you can put the letters H-E-L-L-O together to type out hello to someone in a text message. And symbols can also be communicated non-verbally. For example, if you were to wave your hand back and forth in somebody in order to greet them, right? So these symbols, whether I say the word hello, whether I write it out, or whether I simply wave my hand, don't actually mean anything. They only mean something because we agree that the word hello, or writing hello, or waving hello are all means of greeting someone. And this brings us to the idea of the triangle of meaning. So the triangle of meaning is a model of communication that indicates the relationship between a thought, a symbol, and a referent. So in the image here, we see the symbol, right, the word cat. We see the thought, or the sender's idea of a cat. And we see the referent, or the actual object of a cat. So the symbol is the word that represents the speaker's idea, the thought. So the symbol here is the word cat, and the referent is the object or idea to which the symbol refers. And as you can see, there is an indirect relationship between the symbols and the reference, because again, the symbol cat, the letters C-A-T, don't have any inherent meaning in them. They only refer to the word cat because we agree that that's what the word cat means. And this brings us to the idea of words having different definitions. So for our purposes, a word can have a denotative definition and a connotative definition, and they can have multiple of each as well. But denotation, or the denotative definition of a word, refers to the definitions that are accepted by the language group as a whole, otherwise known as the dictionary definition of the word. So if I was to look up the word cat in the dictionary, if I was to go to Google and type in the word cat, I would see the definition being something along the lines of a small carnivorous feline with short fur, a short snout, whiskers, and retractile claws, something along those lines. But when you thought of the word cat, you probably didn't think of that dictionary definition, right? You didn't think cat, a small carnivorous feline, blah, 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 right? Instead, you likely thought of the connotation of the word. So connotation refers to the definitions that are based on emotion or experience associations that people have with a word. So when I said the word cat, you maybe thought of an orange cat like Garfield, or a black cat like around Halloween, right? Maybe you thought of your own cat. I thought of my cat, right? But none of you probably thought of my cat, Minnie, because she's not your cat. You don't have any emotional experience with her. And so even though this is what I was thinking of, it wasn't necessarily what you were thinking of. And so it's really important for us to recognize that there might be different connotative definitions and different denotative definitions of a word when we use that word in our communication, right? So I might have been thinking of my cat. Maybe someone else was thinking of a lion or a tiger. And so they might be really confused why I'm talking about this small thing. Or put it another way, right? If I am trying to communicate something and I use the word cat, but my thought is of a lion or a tiger, for example, and I say the word cat and I start describing it and I'm like, yeah, it weighs like 600 pounds and it has stripes. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You're talking about a tiger, right? While a tiger is a cat, that wasn't what I was expecting of you. That wasn't my connotation, my experience of a cat. My experience of a cat is a house cat, not some 600, 700-pound beast. And so you do have to be careful with the words that you choose and be aware of the different connotations that might be in the room and try to make sure that whoever you are speaking to is on the same page as you, that you are using the same definitions for the words that you are choosing to use to try to get your message across. Now, in addition to language being symbolic and having these different definitions, we also know that language is learned, that we are not born inherently knowing a language. It's something that we develop over the course of the first few years of our lives. And so ultimately, the symbols that we use have no meaning until we assign that meaning to those symbols. And we have to learn over time which symbols go with which reference. This is why when you're teaching a child a language, you often see those flashcards that say apple and then it has a picture of an apple, or it says cat and it has a picture of a cat, so that we can start to make those connections between the symbol and the referent. Now, in addition, we know that language has rules. And one of the biggest rule structures that any language has are the grammatical rules of that language. So grammar refers to the rules that govern how words are used to make phrases and sentences. And these grammatical rules are going to differ across languages. For example, in English, we know that you need a subject and a verb and all of these sorts of things in order to make a complete sentence, but the rules for how those subjects and verbs are different in English versus Spanish versus French, right? And so that's why English can often be so challenging for folks who are learning English as a second language, because those grammatical rules are so different. And also because oftentimes, even though it's a quote unquote rule, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to use that rule 100% of the time. Rules are very often broken in English, especially. Now, in addition, to kind of like wrap all of this up, it's just important for us to take away from this idea of language and meaning that the meaning of our language is in people rather than in the words themselves. The words themselves don't mean anything unless we agree that those words mean something. Right? And so we have to make sure that the people with whom we are communicating are on the same page about what those words mean. So, for example, if you see the comic that's on the screen right now, a granddaughter is talking to her grandmother, and they are at some kind of ancient ruin that has a lot of rocks around. And the granddaughter is saying, "Grandma, it's just that when I said I wanted to get into classic rock, this isn't what I had in mind." So grandma and granddaughter had different meanings of the words classic rock, right? And this is because the meanings are in people. We have different connotations, we have different understandings of these words, and ultimately, in order for us to be understood, we have to have the same meanings. We have to agree on what these symbols, what these words mean, so that we can communicate effectively.